All right. So welcome everyone. This session is all about green ventures. So if you are interested in green venture programs or what green venture means within the Impact Hub network, you're in the right space. Katya and I are going to kind of jointly be walking through some information for you, and then we'll spend a lot of the time in discussion today. But thanks for joining. And Katya, do you want to maybe kick us off? Well, Katya and I can just introduce ourselves so you know what our role is as it relates to the environmental strategy at the Impact Hub company. And I think most of you have what Impact Hub you're from, so that's great. So let's kick it off with maybe our introductions, and then we can see what we're up to today.
Do we have a check-in question as well, or just we do the intro?
Yeah, we'll do a check-in question after we introduce the two of us, just so people know who we are. Great.
Okay. I'm Katya. I'm working for Impact Hub Global now, originally co-founder of Impact Hub Moscow, and now in the environmental team, I'm doing program design and fundraising for environmental programs.
Thanks, Katya. And I'm Kaylee. I'm based in Pennsylvania in the US, and I specifically help with the impact measurement and knowledge management of environmental strategy related things for Impact Hub company. So a lot of the resources I'm hoping you all have explored, including this green venture resource, I probably had some part to play in helping that get up there. This is the other people on our team, Anne, Edson, Faiza, and Luis, who you may interact with at some time. So all of us are here to support you when it comes to things related to the environment. So to kick us off, we have a check-in question. If you want to come off mute, feel free. If not, you can put it in the chat. But our check-in question is, what environmental issues do you care the most about and why? So take some time to think, and this can be you personally. It doesn't necessarily have to align with what your Impact Hub is doing, but what you care about when it comes to the environment. Take a few moments and go ahead and throw that in the chat or share out loud. Anyone? I can share while y'all are thinking. I think mine, and for those just joining, welcome. We're just doing a quick check-in question before we dive into the green venture topic. I think one of mine is business related pollution in local areas. So where I am in the United States, there's a lot of warehouses and there's a lot of pollution related to that popping up in rural areas that they didn't have before. So I am specifically interested and care about that and how we work with those businesses to try to reduce it. Anyone else?
I can go. Okay, I can see people writing in the chat, but I can share with them mine. So I'm when I just started working for the global team, I started researching on the topic of food, among other issues, and I learned that about the food paradox, that we need so much more food to sustain the growing population. And then on the other hand, food is the biggest contributor, one of the biggest, the second biggest contributor to climate change. So this food paradox, and also where I live, in Italy, there are sometimes challenges with the fresh food, even though is like the country where it grows just here. So that's the issue I'm caring about the most.
Thanks, Katya. Go ahead, Bora. Yeah, go ahead, Bora, please.
Hi, sorry, I cannot open my videos, internet connection over here. But my issue that's like close to home, I think it's single-use plastic. because in Asia, especially in Cambodia, because like the cheap price of plastics, and so it's like super hard to actually eradicate this issue. And so it's also even hard to change the behavior of like a regular consumer because they have to like trade off between like sustainability or going green or to just like support their living standards. So this is an issue that I care about. So thank you so much.
Thanks for sharing. And yeah, I see lots of sharing in the chat too. So thanks everyone. I think it's helpful to hear that there's, yeah, a whole spectrum of things that we care about. And when it comes to programs, I know a lot of us are within our impact hubs have different programs that might address different aspects of these. So we'll be excited to hear more about those too as we go through. So for today, we have just a short time together. We are going to recap the green venture definition and criteria resource that we have live on our knowledge base. And then we're going to open it up to some Q&A and discussion related to that tool. And then we'd like to have some discussion together to hear from one another what types of green venture programs maybe we already have in place in your Impact Hub, and Katya, who supports a lot of our program work, will provide some examples as well. And then we'll just close it off to see if there's any next steps or resources you all feel like you still need after the call today. Katya, anything you want to add before we dive in?
I think it's good.
Okay.
It's good now.
Good. I'm just reading Grace's comment around environmental justice issues, which, yeah, climate justice and that issue is actually one we've been talking about as a team quite a lot as well. So thanks for sharing that. Okay, so before we get started, maybe just in the chat, or if you want to use emojis, how many of you have looked at the green venture criteria? Here is what it looks like to give you a reminder. It's okay if you haven't, but just to get an idea. So Grace has. Any other thumbs up? Have you seen this before? Is this your first time today seeing it? Maybe a thumbs down if you didn't see it. Okay, we got Bora with a thumbs up. Okay. Okay, so a few of us, okay, and not, that's all right. So we have a mixture. Okay, so we're gonna do a recap. And so if this is your first time, no worries. We will encourage you to review this afterwards. But we wanna kind of demo how this is meant to work anyway for those who have seen it. Okay, so high level, we found that there was a lot of questions in the network around, we wanna support green ventures, but what in the world is a green venture? How do we know if we're working with a business that's considered green? So we came up with a definition after a lot of research. I will say this is not perfect. We just released this venture definition earlier in the year. We are open to feedback, but we did feel like it was helpful to have something that collectively we could say, okay, this is what we're generally aiming for when we talk about working with green ventures. So the definition is that it's a venture, a business in any stage of development where their business model is structured and verified to have positive impact on the environment and have a meaningful environmental and DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion commitments. So we'll break down what that means, but just as Grace mentioned in the chat there, we do include an element of looking at the justice aspect of the environment because they were very closely linked. And we also focus on not just businesses who say they have a focus on the environment, but we have the word verified in there and meaningful in there, which means we're actually looking for some evidence to show that this business doesn't just say they're doing something, but they in fact can show at least their strategy for doing so. In summary, the criteria that comes along with this is a list of questions that you could ask a business or venture to understand if they fit the criteria. So at a high level, the definition includes any business. So it could be a business that is just starting up, and therefore we might ask them slightly different questions. It could be a scaling business that's large, has been around for years. It can be any business on that spectrum. We look at businesses in any industry, mostly. You're going to hear the word possibly put in our criteria quite a lot, which means it depends on your program. So there are certain industries that, by nature of what the industry is, typically are not seen as being green. You can see a couple of those listed here. This doesn't mean we shouldn't be partnering and working with these businesses, because these industries have large environmental footprints. So there can be a lot of positive impact coming out from us working with them. But depending on the type of program you're running, you may want to screen certain industries out if you're trying to provide funding, for example, to a particular type of industry that's having a particular business model. We do look in the criteria to make sure the business has an environmental business model, and I'll go into detail of what that could look like. But essentially, we're looking at what, at the core, what does the business do? Do they have a product or a service or a process that's structured intentionally to restore or preserve the environment? A green venture isn't a business that by chance, is maybe doing one good thing for the environment. It's really looking at intention. And then we look at commitments. When we say commitment, we're thinking about written commitments. So we look at businesses who have a serious commitment to net zero, or at least looking at their carbon and measuring it and looking at their greenhouse gas reduction. We're looking for businesses that have an environmental policy and having a business that is linked to a particular SDG, a sustainable development goal related to the environment. So we're looking at, they're not just talking about it, but they actually have something written down that shows they're committed to this. It's part of their strategy. It's part of their goals. Then we look at the environmental impact on its own. So depending on the stage of the company, we look at if they have any evidence of environmental impact or a management system to track it. Again, we want to make sure that it isn't just greenwashing, so they aren't just saying they're doing something, but that they can actually show it in evidence. And finally, we do, according to this definition, they have to show that they've thought about how the environment relates to the justice issue and DEI. So in summary, any business in an eligible industry that has an environmental business model, clear environmental and DEI commitments, and can show evidence. Now, what does this actually look like? I want to show you the criteria, and then, like I said, we'll have time for questions and digging into this a bit more. So this criteria, the first thing you'll see is the definition, and that this is just what I walked through. It's high level. If you are putting a program out and saying, we're looking for green ventures, we have this pilot program, or we have a funding competition, this is something you could use as high level definition. But where we think it can be really helpful is using the criteria itself. So this criteria is a comprehensive set of questions that you can ask ventures or businesses in helping determine if they're green. So it's meant to be kind of like a mini survey. You could put it in an intake form, or if you're asking for a survey to be filled out as part of an application, the idea is that you could embed these questions, and it would help you and your team in your due diligence process to determine if you want to include this business or venture in your program based on this criteria. We've added in based on their answers if they'd be eligible or not, but I would say that this should be open to the discretion of what your particular program, goal, and focus is. So you'll see the word possibly sometimes, and that's an indication that it's kind of up to you what you want to do. So it really depends on the program itself. But at a high level, these are the types of questions we'd encourage you to ask. And then this is some guidance on if you should include them based on their response. So I'm going to quickly kind of go through the criteria, and then we'll go through some examples, and then we'll pause and see how you're feeling and open up if Katya wants to add anything related to the definition itself. So to begin, thinking of intake form that this potential venture is filling out for your program, we'd ask them what stage their business is in. This is mostly for your knowledge. Again, we think any could be eligible to be considered a green venture, but depending on your program, you might only be looking to work with businesses at scale or businesses that are getting ready to scale and in the growth stage. So you could use this to determine who you want to be working with. Then we ask them if they are in any of those industries that typically are a red flag. If yes, we ask them to explain, and then you can pick if you choose them or not. Again, I want to emphasize that while these industries are often seen as negative, there's a lot of potential positive impact to work with them and help them become more green. So it really just depends on your project. And you can change this list depending on your program. And then we get into some questions related to the environmental business model. So we ask a yes or no question if they have a product, a service, or a process that's structured to restore or preserve the environment. This should be yes. If they're saying no to this, they're flat out saying this really isn't a focus of ours. We don't really have anything in what we're selling or producing or how we operate. So this would be, if they say no, you might want to stop there. If they say yes, we then have these questions here that ask them, what exactly are they focused on? These are taken from the B Impact Assessment. For those of you who are familiar with B Lab and the B Corp certification. So these are kind of verified standards that we're adopting because they're used globally. So this gives them answers so you understand where is your focus. Are you selling maybe a product or a service that is related to renewable energy or conserves the environment or is related to the well-being of land or animals? Is something related to being less toxic or less hazardous? Are you involved in education or research related to the environment? Or maybe you're not doing any of that, but maybe you have a manufacturing process that's innovative and sustainable in some way. So there's lots of answers here. And the idea is that they're all eligible, but it gives you a sense for like, what's your mission? What are you actually doing? So those are just some guidance. And again, if they're saying, no, we don't do any of these things, that's when we'd pause and say, okay, then why do you think you're green? Okay, then we go into the commitment. So this is less around what your core business is and more around your practices and day to day. So we ask them if they have an environmental policy, yes or no. If they have a net zero commitment, yes or no. Again, you might want to adopt this and say climate neutral commitment, but we think that for it to be green, they need to at least be thinking about and be making progress towards their greenhouse gas emissions. Then the SDGs that I mentioned come up. So we ask them to pick one or pick as many as they want that they align with. The idea is that if they aren't aligned with, one of the green focused SDGs, we'd question, then what are you working towards? Now, they can be definitely working on multiple SDGs. So it's not bad for them to be working on gender equality or quality education at all, but we would like them to at least choose one of the environmentally focused ones in addition to some of the others. And again, this is your call. Maybe this isn't something you necessarily want to focus on for your program, but we're trying to make that alignment since these are global goals. Okay, and then we have environmental impact. So if they're in growing or scaling, we ask, do you actually have a environmental management system in place? So do you have a system in place to actually measure your environmental footprint? If they're a startup or they're in idea stage, we ask, what's your intended plan to measure this? And this is where they'd have to write it and describe it to us because maybe it's too early for them to do that. But if they say we don't have any intentions of measuring environmental footprint, again, we'd question that green venture piece. And then we also look at how they're measuring the impact of their business themselves. So if they said they had a product that's environmentally focused, how are you then verifying that impact's happening? And then finally, the commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion. It's a yes or no. Do you have a commitment related to this? And we call out climate justice. And again, that's a yes, we do, no, we don't. And there's a lot of opportunity for education in this as well. If they're saying no, maybe you still work with them, but that's something that you're assisting them with. But it gives you a clear idea of kind of where they are on this scale of being a green venture that has the full commitments, is measuring what they're doing, has it integrated in the business, and those who maybe aren't quite there. So what does this look like in practice? I didn't want to, I'm calling out 3 companies that I think fit the criteria that I'll show you, and then a couple theoretical ones that don't. These are just random companies. They are all certified B Corps because I know certified B Corps are asked these particular questions, but you probably all have examples too. So one I pulled out here is EcoBirdie, which is a company that collects old plastic toys and designs and produces them into furniture here. And they have a very robust environmental management system that they're working towards. We have another company here called Rising Sun, I believe in Chile. They do solar energy projects and have a lot of different kind of financing possibilities for clients who maybe don't necessarily have the money to go solar right away. And then we have Green Vines, which is a company, I think in Taiwan, that is a lifestyle brand company that uses organic and less toxic ingredients for personal care products. And again, they have a robust set of commitments and things they're tracking. These are just a couple of examples. There's tons out there. You probably all have examples yourself. Now, what are green ventures not? So again, these are, I didn't want to call out any particular companies, but you can think of a traditional company that's making, pens, and they use solar power energy, and that's all they do. We'd say that's not a green venture. That's one good practice that you have, but it wouldn't fit the criteria. And then we have a company that has an environmental mission, but doesn't do anything in practice. So think of a business on their website. They might have a sentence around their commitment to the environment, but they actually don't have anything formally written or that they're doing in practice. That would be something we'd call greenwashing then. And then finally, maybe a company that claims an environmental impact, but doesn't have any way to measure it or report it. So think of a business that's saying they are helping deforestation in a particular part of the world, but then no understanding or follow-up around how they're doing that or the impact of it. That would be an example of a company that maybe thinks they're doing something, but they can't back up that they actually are. So those are just 3 examples that I would say are not included. It's hard, it's not always black and white. So there might be follow-up questions to determine, where these are, but I'd say generally that's something we would not include. So let me pause there. I just shared a lot of information. Katya, is there anything you want to add around the general definition before we open it up, and then we'll get into examples of programs?
No, nothing in particular to the general definition. Just maybe a disclaimer and the link to the programs is that, of course, this criteria was just developed recently. So when I will share the examples of programs, we don't yet know whether Impact Hubs assessed green ventures as participants with this or any kind of criterion, right? So we call the program examples on green ventures, incubation, acceleration, and scaling. But yeah, just a disclaimer to remember that now we have a high standard to look at, and we can adjust it and yeah, insert in the future programs that we are running.
Thanks. That's good to remember. This is new. And I should also add that this was created because we heard from many people that they were struggling with knowing like what this means when they were saying we have a program that works with green ventures. You might be in an impact hub that already had a definition, and already had a way to measure it. We are not saying you have to let go of that and now use this, but we did want to create something that we could offer to support for those of you who maybe don't have a way to find that out. And as Impact Hub company, we are committed to using this for the programs that go across different regions. So with that, let's just open it up for maybe 10 minutes here of any questions you have around the criteria or the definition. Some things I have to help us is, where do you still feel like there's too much uncertainty or grayness? And I'm also curious how people feel about the areas left open as like possibly green, depending on your industry. So if you want to put it in the chat, or if you want to speak out loud, that's fine. This is just a space to ask anything. And I know, depending on your impact hub, we have a spectrum of impact hubs who have been doing green venture programs for years, and some who've never done them. So feel free to ask any question. This is a safe place.
Hi, thanks. This is Grace. I was wondering if anybody has created a form that might help you with going through the checklist, and if so, could you share an example of that form?
Hi, Grace. Nice to hear you, and thanks for joining. So, to my knowledge, a form has not yet been created that I'm aware of, but I like that idea. Maybe, Katya, we can talk. Maybe we can make one ourselves, and we can be using that. It's very new, so I honestly don't know how many people are using this yet, but I'll take that as a next step. I think that would be great to create a form that can then be copied and amended for your own use. And we'll share that out with you all once we create it. I do think a form is the best way to think about this. The Excel is a little clunky. We'll give space if anyone else has any.
I'll jump in again about the possibly areas. I appreciate that there is room open for people to be able to exercise their own best judgment. Because there's so many situations that depend on context. So that's how I come up with the possibly question.
That's helpful feedback, Grace. And yeah, once people start using this, I'll be curious to hear what criteria certain teams end up actually using depending on the program. I'm just seeing what Christine wrote here from Impact Hub Global, that it's related to these questions. It's probably more about putting these directly into the program application form rather than a separate form. Yeah, which I think I totally agree. Christine, that's how it would end up being used. But if it's helpful, I think I could still put it in a format just to give you all an idea of what it would look like potentially. But I think that is the hope, that you would take these, embed them into what system or process you already have. Yeah, cool. Yep. Yeah, I think we could make it edited, and then you could be embedding it into your other form. We'll work on that. That's great. Thanks, Christine. Yep, exactly, Grace. Any other thoughts on the definition? I'll just go to this page again in case that helps jog. If not, what we're going to do next is to go into some examples of green programs and actually open it up. We'll stay in, I think, one group since there's not a ton of us. We'd love to hear some examples that you might already have, but one more minute to see if there's any other questions or comments at this point too around it. Okay. If you think of questions, please put them in the chat or comments. We can come back to them as we go. But maybe what we'll do now is, yeah, maybe Katya, I'll pass it to you if you want to give some examples, and I'll stop sharing my screen. If I don't know if you want to share your screen, you're welcome to. If not, we can hear a couple of examples and then we'll open it up. We're curious to hear from you all too.
Yes, thank you, Kelly. So, as you know, we usually differentiate programs based on stage, theme, or a target group, and almost in every dimension, we already have in the network good examples of programs that are focusing on ventures that are probably green based on the criteria, and at least striving for it. And well, I would name a few, but there are certainly many more. So one of the programs that is focused on agriculture and incubation of ventures, a good example is from Cambodia, and here with us is Bora on the call, so you can, Bora, you can give more details, but I know that the Duck Dam Incubator is a good example of agricultural programs where participants help farmers, or they are themselves farmers, and they are trying to all provide farmers with the necessary techniques, technologies, contacts, some products that can be helpful for their development and growth. One other program that is focused on more on the next stage, a good example again in agriculture is Ignite Accelerator from Kigali, that is focused on food and makes it an objective to accelerate ventures in agricultural area, in the agricultural theme, and now they will actually expand it to more countries around Africa. A good example of the corporate program is the programs of Impact Hub Vienna. So, and again, Patrick is with us on the call. Patrick, if you want to comment and put specific examples, you can do it, and especially if you already use any kind of criteria for green ventures. But I think your corporate accelerators and accelerators for the city, for example, to make Vienna greener is a good example where you search for ventures who already have green technologies, products, and you aim at accelerating them further. Yeah, I see you put the video, so please feel free to add.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks, Katya, for the space as well, and Kali. Yeah, I'm not sure if there's much to say from my side, to be honest. It's more like it's an incremental thinking process when we kick off programs or when we structure programs, and it's not like that we implement it most of the time. I mean, we have this kind of white label programs, but actually it's also asked for, it's requested from the clients, so from the partners of the city or other organizations we work with. So that's why we, to be honest, at least myself, I wasn't involved in such a structured way as you just explained it to us, but it's definitely helpful. So that's definitely an awesome tool you provide us, which I'm also sharing with my team and entrepreneurship support, and just to have another checklist just in the back of our heads. That's very thoughtful. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. Even in the scouting, as even if we are only doing scouting for a client, for some institution, we could already easily implement the criteria within the search. Another example that is really inspiring to me is from São Paulo, is IdeaGov Accelerator that is more on the energy and climate neutrality theme. So Impact Hub is looking for ventures that are working on these issues, and then connects them to local governments in Brazil so that they could be scaled in the country, around the country. The local governments can take the product, the technology, and use it in various regions of the country. So we have actually, we have really a lot. Some impact hubs focus on the entire ecosystems, like Amsterdam and Berlin have circular ecosystem, fashion ecosystem, food ecosystem, and there you certainly find the ventures that are already embedding the criteria and impact hub working with these ventures to help them grow. Yeah, so I can go on and on, but we are mostly interested to hear from you what it means for you, and what this new criteria will mean for your work and how you envision using it.
Thanks, Katya. Yeah, so curious if anyone on the call, is willing to share any examples of programs they've done that you think would fit this criteria. So please share. We're curious to hear. And Katya, thanks again for those examples. If you want to put links, you can also do that if you have a dedicated page to it, maybe. I'm happy to share my screen and show it if helpful. I'm trying to be better with silence on calls, so I'll give it another minute to give you a chance before I share some.
And I don't just want to use time for some advertisement and promotion. You can find a lot of examples in the environmental toolkit version 1, and also the new version already released, right? We have 2.0, or just around the corner, the 2.0 version of environmental toolkit. And you can read how different impact hubs are working with green ventures.
Awesome. Thanks, Katya. We just got an example from Honduras. There's a link shared. Thank you. And I'm going to see if I can. Do you want to say anything about it?
Yes.
The name is intriguing.
Yeah. We have the Sheet Challenge in English, in Spanish. This is an innovation program focused on solutioning in the AGO6, Warren's Tenement. We work for people. They are our partners, and we attend entrepreneurs that have impact in the community that don't have access to water and have solutions to develop new models for access to water and how to manage the access to more potable water and the sentiment here in Honduras.
Fantastic. That's a great example. Thanks for sharing.
You're welcome.
Yeah, go
And
ahead,
I'm
Bora.
curious to hear. Okay, yeah, Bora, go ahead.
Oh yeah. So for Impact Hub Phnom Penh, we just concluded a program called Build for People. So that one we specifically focus on like an early stage of startup. So we're like a startup who have like an ideas on like building a sustainable and green city solution to because there are like 4 groups. One's focused on being like this solar pump to help like people, especially those in remote area, to have like access to water. But also we have like one team who's also focused like being like an eco brick to actually utilize in like building materials and construction in the city. So this is like an example, like an early stage, but we integrate like a green element to it. Also, yeah, so that one.
Is
So thank you
this
for
the right
sharing
one?
the screen. Yeah,
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 sure.
yeah, that's the right one. Yeah, thank you.
Great, I'll share this link in here. Great. So an example from Impact Hub in Istanbul. Mm-hmm. Mm. So this is Grace's example, Houston. So yeah, so I think this is a good example of maybe where you turn that on its head. So maybe you specifically work with those who are not completely green, or depending on how they answer, you're targeting those that need support in certain areas. And this is one where they're helping them embed circularity initiative into their work, which is awesome. So Grace, do you find it helpful? I'm curious, like having this criteria, almost instead of saying this is who we're working with, you almost have like helpful to envision the types of ventures that maybe come out of your program or the types of practices they'll have after going through that initiative.
So for us, because we are in an area where there are a couple different accelerator programs specifically for green tech or clean tech ventures, sometimes once they go through the program, or if they were not accepted into the program but they want to apply again, they don't really have a good idea of how they're not as green as they could be, or if they would like to be greener. And I think having a rubric of just saying this is how, at least the lens that we look at and the criteria that we have for determining whether you're a green venture or not, like just having it exist is really helpful, because I think the other programs don't have this. And then being able to walk them through and say, well, here are some of the ways that you are and some of the ways that you aren't, and we would love to work with you, or we'd love to have you as part of our community so that we can help you be more green, would be helpful. It's also helpful so we have a lot of people in the idea stage and a lot of members that are in the scale stage. So what I just described would be helpful for those in the scale stage, but for those in the idea stage, also having a rubric so they understand, here are some of the things you might think about as you are also developing your business. This would be also helpful for that.
Thanks for sharing. That's great.
I think if there's a way of using this as a benchmark, which is another reason why the form might be helpful, it could be something that we do with all of our folks who just want to be a member of Impact Hub Houston, because we do provide kind of light incubation programming throughout the course of their membership. It would help us, see if they did move the needle and became more green towards the end of their membership. And so like when we think about green ventures, I know that there are some specifically working to tackle climate issues and the environment and agriculture and sustainability and all those things. But I feel like every company should eventually be a green company. We should all have these kind of circular economy or sustainability and resilience practices that are embedded in the companies. Just I think it's like how much is your business model focused on that versus it's not at all.
Yeah. Totally agree.
Yes, thank you for sharing this. I'm also curious if you see any possible additions to the model based on your local reality. And Grace, I think you also mentioned this in the beginning. Do you see any possible how can I say the additions, if you need to adjust it, or you are ready to use it as it is? So it's also helpful for us to know whether we should develop it further.
I think it's a good start for us. We were having a partnerships conversation with Peter and Halliburton Labs, for instance, and they're interested in helping green companies scale, like hard tech, clean hard tech companies scale, and helping them understand what is how do we evaluate a company as being green, helps them also think about how they are evaluating companies to help them scale, and then also how they are evaluating themselves as a company. Well, Halliburton Labs is
isn't completely involved in the day-to-day, I would say, or if at all, in regular Halliburton company, but knowing, you know, how they can contrast between the labs and Halliburton proper, I think helps them start evaluating themselves differently, so that maybe they can pull the rest of the company in a more green and sustainable direction.
So I feel like it's
Yeah,
very helpful for
we hope
partnerships
so.
as well. Yeah.
These are fantastic. And is there any other shares? I know I do want to maybe, Katya, I just thought it probably is helpful for us to do a screen share of our knowledge space to show what resources we have also. But any other examples or conversation before we do that? Okay. Well, Katya, anything else you want to mention around the programs piece?
I just want to mention that once any of you implement the criteria, we would love to hear from you, how it went, and we could showcase also your example to other impact hubs that are starting to use it. So please let us know that you have used it and your feedback, and we would like to speak to you.
Absolutely. Yeah, like I said in the beginning, this is very new, so we are really curious to hear feedback. Okay, then why don't we'll give a couple minutes back, but let's just maybe end with this. I'm not sure how many of you are aware that on our Impact Hub Force, we have knowledge base. And as of late last year, we now have an environmental action section. This has lots of resources in it. We're actually in the middle of organizing this in a way that is a bit more helpful. But there's very specific resources here. So net zero, food and agriculture, circularity, as we mentioned a little bit earlier. We also have some generic resources, just like what is the environmental strategy of Impact Hub. We also have an environmental action toolkit that Katya referenced, which is like your go-to place for anything related to the environment. It gives a nice overview of all of the work collectively we're doing as a network. And then we have the program specific things. So you can find the Green Venture criteria and a one-pager of the definition here. We also have, Katya has taken lead on creating 2-pager guides on environmental program descriptions to help you with fundraising and addressing your particular goals related to some of the environmental challenges, which looks like this. So you also have this document talks about the Green Venture definition, but it gives you a really nice overview of the different programs, depending on who you're targeting, by maturity of your Impact Hub, or by the type of approach if you're focusing on a particular element. And then it's just like jam-packed with really helpful information on how to run particular programs. So feel free to check that out, and like tons of other stuff on here. We are running a variety of webinars this year. So if we have courses as well. So if you are curious around net zero and how to start tracking net zero for your, or rather how to track carbon for your Impact Hub, I'd encourage you to check out our toolkit as well as our net zero emission course. We also have an environmental strategy toolkit course. You can take it anytime. If you choose to take one of those courses, we are running webinars every quarter that are spaces to have conversations around those topics. All of this will be featured in Maker's Digest, so keep your eye out for it. But we're really starting to provide more capacity building for you all related to these topics. So today was Green Venture, but more things to come. And the final thing I'll just say is, like Katya said, we want to hear from you, how you're using the Green Venture criteria, but just in general, if there's ways you think our team could support. So I'll leave you here with our general email address for the environmental team. You're also welcome. You have my email now and Katya. So like feel free to reach out directly as well if there's conversations or ways we can support. But otherwise, we're really grateful for you joining today, and we'll continue to kind of share updates as we use this resource. So thanks for joining. And we have a couple minutes, so I'll stay online if anyone has any questions they thought of or wants to have a conversation. I'll stay on. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day. I know it's all different times of day depending where you are. So thanks for joining early and late or middle of day. Take care.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Have a good
Thanks,
night,
Laura.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Awesome. Thanks, Patrick.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thanks for organizing. See you then.
Thanks for joining.
Sure.